This evening's Dharma talk is titled, This Moment. Is that correct? Is that what I told you? Good. This moment. What am I going to say about that? So, this moment really doesn't have the kind of status that, say, this hour, this minute, even this second. It has a, this moment is something we talk about. We even say, just a moment. I'll get with you in just a moment. And it's been said, and I'm saying, that it has no dimension to it. It's there, but it's an interesting concept, this moment, momentariness, momentum. It doesn't have any thickness to it. It has no, doesn't really have a dimension particularly, yet that's a very useful concept that we use all the time. And so the sitting practice of meditation, shikantaza, zazen, holding still and watching, observing what it continues to move, over time, by watching the movement, by watching the spaces, by watching the phenomena, whatever is rising in any of the six sense fields, including the mind, we begin to kind of get used to the way that works. It's not like we could come out of that experience and begin to write a book about it particularly. On the other hand, if we're training ourselves in a way of just observing, just watching, without adding. I often say, don't add. And what I mean is, I'm not saying don't think, don't analyze, don't speculate, don't do all of that. But when you're practicing sitting meditation, holding very still, hold this posture, you can't control the mind. I know you've tried. I can't. We can't. It'd be nice to go in and say, I'm going to turn that down a little bit. And this good feeling, I'm going to turn that up a little bit. Of course, we try to do that artificially. Sometimes drugs, sometimes activity, sometimes, pardon me. Well, all kinds of things that we can do to modify our state of mind. So, we could use the food metaphor, which I sometimes use, and other teachers have used also, that it's studying the Dharma, which we do a lot of here, is like reading a menu, a recipe, reading concepts, ideas, structures about something, about what is that about? What is that something? All kinds of structures and so on that help bring us further and further, more and more into the mandala, in which there's a possibility of realizing what this is fundamentally. And when you realize, and it's not even a when, because then it would be, a particular part of time. So it tends to happen outside of time in terms of our experience, if it's could even be called a happening at all. Because when you realize, if there is that, then you're grandfathered in, you're grandmothered in, you're whatever the other ones are in. And you realize this, you've always known this innately, deeply. You've known this in here. Not here, not there. You may need this to get there and this to get there, but if there's any arrival, it's here. And you won't know it. You'll have no proof. You won't even be able to brag about it. As it says in, I think, Professor Walden can help me out here if I can't remember. In the Nirvana Sutra, it says, if you If you realize something, this is delusion. If you don't realize anything, this is awakening or enlightenment. Am I close? So, how would that even be helpful? Not realize we're always going around not knowing something, and wondering how can we get away from the not knowing and get more knowing, because the knowing gives what? The self-centeredness, the seventh consciousness of the Klesha mind, a reference point, which is where it gets its oxygen from. It gets its sustenance from that. And so what we're doing when we sit down in front of a wall, as we're doing here, sit down, hold still for long periods of time, hours, days, months, weeks. And just observe what is happening. We begin to understand deeply what this is about, even in a conceptual sense. But the fundamental understanding is not an experience. It may have some experiential overtones to it, but it's not an experience. Because if you have an experience, here's one, gone. Anything that arises is going away. So quite often the metaphor that we hear, and I've used many times because I think it's a good one, is unborn, unceasing with a nature, like the sky. We need some kind of metaphor. Let's use the sky. That's the one that is actually nothing that we impute blueness to. Or birds. You knew birds were imputed, right? No, impute. So there's no guarantee, as my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, would say. It was what a wonderful thing to say to somebody. At the same time, you're encouraging someone to practice, and then say that there's no guarantee. You may never get there. You may never understand this. What a great, what a very respectful thing to say to someone, instead of giving them some kind of a tidbit. Yeah. It's fundamentally, if you want fearlessness, then you're going to have to be hopeless. I'm not saying this in the negative sense. I'm saying without anything else, don't look ahead to anything else. This is fearlessness, because there's no one that can be harmed. This doesn't mean you don't have nerve endings that can be abraded, of course. Some things hurt the eyes to look at, some things hurt the ears to listen to, some things hurt to touch, hurt to smell, hurt to think, hurt to feel. So we're not going to get away from the First Noble Truth. And there's no need to. Without the First Noble Truth, we couldn't do this. As it says, I think in the Diamond Sutra, it gives you something, and that takes it away, and then it gives it back to you. Can anybody recite a line from that? This is an auspicious dharma. It's not an auspicious dharma, therefore it's not. How does that go? Of course, I'm going to look at you. But anybody that can remember that, can you remember that?
Well, it just seems like it's a repeating pattern. A statement about X is not a statement about X. Mm-hmm. Therefore we say X.
Exactly. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. So what is that? Why would the author or authors of the Diamond Sutra or any other text that works with relative truth in the same way and endeavoring to point to ultimacy, the ultimate nature of who you actually are? It's just a way of working with the thinking process in such a way that we don't get rid of it. You don't need to get rid of anything. You don't need to stop thinking. The fundamental realization, as far as I see it, and as far as it seems to be expressed in the Yogacara teachings, is there's no subject and there's no object. Or should I say there's no object and there's no subject. There's just the perception. And even that's shaky. So, this moment, what's being said, what's being suggested and encouraged, if you come in this room, you give me permission to talk to you, to say things. When you leave this room, do whatever you want to do. But consider this. Sit down, hold still, watch what moves without adding, subtracting, or dividing passion, aggression, and ignorance. Don't do anything with it. No matter how wonderful it is, don't add. No matter how terrible it is, don't add. Just be there. Just watch what it does. Just watch what arises in any of the six sense fields. And by doing this, what you're doing, more metaphors, of course, you're kind of putting yourself into, as if you're reading a recipe, reading the menu, reading the instructions, reading the structure, reading what this is, going back over it, like whoever it is, whether it's the Buddha, whether it's a Vasubandhu, or whether it's Dogen Zenji. Whomever it is, we just keep reading that so that if there is any kind of conceptualization going on in the mind, it is at least conceptually accurate. It's like a one-rung ladder, a metaphor that I like. There's one step is in it, but you may have to stand in front of that and look at it for a long time. What else are you going to do? Might as well. Sit down, hold still, look at this wall. Look at our cottage cheese wall. Hold still and watch. It's unlikely that the non-occurrence we call awakening will happen on the cushion. It's more likely that that will happen in such a way that it's not even connected with anything. You could miss it. That's why I'm often saying to you, don't miss your life by covering up your neurosis. Be your neurosis. As Trungpa Rinpoche said, be genuine. It took me decades to understand what that meant. And it's only in retrospect that I understand what I think he was looking at. He was saying, be a fool. Stop trying to be somebody else. Let the judgment come in. It's just like gravity. Stop interfering with gravity. Don't meddle with anything, including your mind. On the other hand, don't go the other direction and believe all your thoughts or your emotions. Same nerve endings, soft and smooth and pleasurable, and same nerve ending. So don't miss your life. Whatever arises, don't agree, passion, don't object, aggression, and certainly don't distract yourself or look away. Ignorance. And all of the other in between and overlapping and underlapping. And questions? Statements?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you say don't add
Yes.
and observe the adding, what's the recognizable difference between observing adding and the adding?
You'll get better and better at it. The more you watch the adding with the intention, and we can talk about intention if you want to, with the intention of not adding, but then you watch yourself add, but there's no addition to the adding of, oh, I shouldn't be adding. That's extra. Or there I go again. That's a cover-up that will cause the spinning of samsara to take you into the next lifetime. More? Spit it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mariah from Texas has a question.
Yes.
She asks, what does it look like to not meddle with your mind?
Lonely. Until there's awakening, which is the way we have to talk about it, and then you're just alone, and you don't mind. There isn't anyone else anyway. Not only is there not anyone else, there isn't anything else. There's just this, always, and it's not separate. And for Mariah, that might entail a great deal of watching disturbance come up and watching threats come up and doing nothing with it but watching it. Just watch. Just appreciate. It's like you're in the Museum of Modern Art, and you're just watching all of the unreality rising in your mind, like Jackson Pollock paintings, or even more horrible, Francis Bacon. There's a odd fellow, painter.
What's the difference between this moment and just this?
Conceptually, they're just a couple of concepts trying to encourage you to keep everything very simple and very direct. It's called a direct perception, but it might not even be that. But we need to say something. So we're going to say that so that you can keep aligning yourself with that. As your day goes on, when you get in your car, you can reflect on this. How is this dependently arisen? What does this mean? To bring the teachings into your everyday door handle reaching. And that way, that will get stronger and stronger, and you'll be flooded with the Dharma until you're not separate from the Dharma. And when you're not separate from the Dharma, you'll be tongue-tied. You can't teach the Dharma unless you're tongue-tied, yes.
With intention, how can you say perception only?
Yes.
And it seems like that would be something we would endeavor to realize.
Yes.
How can you intend something without solidifying that which you're
Just watch the solidification. Just watch that you're solidified and don't interfere with that. You don't want to interfere with something you're trying to study. So don't interfere with it. But it's the ego mind starts to get worried when it starts to see that something may not look too good if people find out how you're solidifying things. What if people knew? It'd be totally embarrassing. More?
So with regards to study,
Yeah.
it seems like the concepts help us investigate, but without even knowing it, unconsciously, subconsciously, we tend to go for the concept without even knowing it and miss the point.
Yes.
So how can we, if we don't even know that's happening, how can we be
You must know what's happening. You're telling me about it. Or are you talking about some other fool? Yeah, go ahead, please.
Is there a way to work with the teachings and the studies so we're not kind of using that as another way of entertainment or solidifying things instead of helping us?
It's not about don't solidify things. I don't teach that. I'm not saying people don't teach, might teach that, and that's fine. They should teach whatever they want to teach. But I'm saying it's about awareness that you're solidifying. You don't want to don't interfere too quickly with your neurosis or your confusion. You actually have to see, because eventually you're going to see that confusion and awakening are not separate things. They're not separate. They're not separate. It's an astonishing realization that completely does away with a whole lot of things, like boredom. No longer bored with anything. More.
So then what's cool boredom? Trungpa talks
It's
about hot
a
boredom
path.
and
The
cool.
ground path in fruition. The ground is suffering. The path is whatever, Shila Samadhi and Prajna, or whatever you're doing to understand, to deepen your practice. And then, and cool boredom has to do with that. Hot boredom has to do with that. Hot boredom is when it's irritating to sit here and do nothing. Cool boredom is when you kind of like not having anything to do but sit there and look at a wall. Not too bad. But it's not awakening. It's just the path of it, part of the path. Yes.
From Sanho in Oklahoma.
Yes, I know.
He asks, how do you plan for the future while being in the moment?
So, in Sanho, what I say about plans. They don't work. You can't make a plan that works. They all fail. That's how you know it's a plan. So I would say just do a little bit of that. Not too much planning. A little bit. It would be helpful, I think. I mean, I could say more about that, but I need to would have to address what it is you're referring to. I'm kind of imagining what would Sanho be planning? Investments or something. Yes.
And then Mariah has a follow-up question.
Yes, Mariah.
Will you explain what you mean by solidifying?
Taking something that is not kind of is moving around, but is aggravating, or that we don't like its lack of that it's a nebulous quality, and so we lock down on it. That's one way. And the other way is solidity, some kind of sometimes called fixation, gives the self-centered mind, the ego mind, a way of hanging on to something so it doesn't have to be aware of how threatened it is. So it's a way of fixating on an idea, clamping down. All of us have had the experience of somebody, we get mad or somebody get upset with somebody, and then that person comes and says, "Oh, it's okay. I'm really sorry that I caused you some discomfort." But we're already into the anger part, and we want to just stay angry. We don't want anybody apologizing to us. Felt kind of good to be pissed off. So another form of the self-centeredness, the ego mind tends to do that. So the sitting practice of meditation and the study that we're doing, studying the two wings of the bird, the intuition facing the wall, and the conceptual mind, or the thinking mind, or what the ego wants to control, is we introduce, you want to control something? Study Yogacara. Let's here, control this. So it introduces us to a labyrinth of ideas that have a relative kind of accuracy and resonate with our deep understanding. That's why it's so magnetizing to go into this material. For some of us, maybe not for all. But this is why I often say it's not important to understand it. You just need to study it. So when people say, I don't get the Buddhist unconscious, I don't really get that. Study it anyway. You don't need to understand it. And of course we want to understand it, but to come in with that reaction right away, you're actually not going through your own layers, your own preconceptions about the material. A lot of it isn't the material at all. It's just our own ignorance. Yes.
Is ego basically threatened?
What do you mean by threatened?
You said earlier, when talking about solidification, it gives the ego something doesn't see how threatened it is. So I was wondering if without that occupation.
Well, it's threatened in the sense that it's unreal. It doesn't want to know that. It's still keeping some kind of hope or fear, hope and fear. It's been said those are the bandits of hope and fear are laying in wait for your wisdom mind, your centaur. What's going to attack that centaur? And so we need to stabilize. So we do that on the cushion. So it's what's has been said before. What's real and valuable is not threatened. You can't threaten reality, and you're not separate from anything anywhere. Can't be threatened. But we go into Trungpa Rinpoche's metaphor as a cocoon. He teaches in the Shambhala teachings the idea that we build a cocoon of ideas and protections and opinions and beliefs and so on around us to keep us from experiencing an open dimension of being that is fearless and hopeless. You can't have hope doesn't work if there's no past and no future. He chuckled. David.
What keeps our cocoons from becoming butterflies?
Become a butterfly?
I don't know. Sounds good.
Don't you think it's kind of corny?
It's an easy
So,
one.
it's pretty good. So it's just fear or some kind of distraction that is running us in some way, some kind of the causes and conditions that arise as any human being or anything are just so, you just can't, my goodness, you just can't find all the hidden tributaries and so on. They're just so So it's so complicated, but what you can find this, and everything is available right here, right now, in this moment. We don't even know what's happening in our stomach. Like I often say, if we were put in charge of our whole body, we'd be dead because we wouldn't know how to digest our food. We'd think, I know there's some kind of chemical I'm supposed to produce there. More? Yeah. Good.
What's the difference between a plan and an intention?
Well, I think the plan is, and don't misunderstand, I'm not saying we shouldn't plan, but just be very aware that anything you set up as a plan, you're going to have to shift it around. So the intention might have more of some kind of attitude based on a bigger picture kind of idea. So you have the intention to get a degree so you can do something with your life that would be interesting, or, but how you would go about doing that. The plan part might be changing quite a bit. At least that's how it seems to me. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of the same way, a little looser with an intention. Should they be treated in the same way, a plan versus an intention, or?
You mean like a disease? Should they be treated? Everything should be treated with awareness practice. And so I think it would be so specific and so personal that, the more awareness around that and less grasping, less rejecting, less passion, aggression, and ignorance if you can. So in other words, don't meddle with anything, even though it's your thought pattern. Don't necessarily go in and try to crowd it one way or crowd it the other way by extra commentary. It's not necessary to have a lot of commentary or elaboration, unless you set out to specifically do that for some kind of a reason. But to do it just out of hope and fear creates more chaos, more spinning, some sorrow.
I have
Sure.
another question about what you said earlier.
Yes.
You said you can't teach the Dharma unless you're tongue-tied.
Mhm.
I'm wondering what you meant by that.
I'm not saying you can't talk about the Dharma. We have people teaching here. People who are monks here teach once a month, sometimes more, depending if they go into the drug rehab, they're teaching there. People who aren't even monks, who study here, go in and teach there. So I'm saying you can't teach it out of realization unless you're realized. And if you're realized, then you're tongue-tied, because there isn't anybody talking anymore. So does the ego mind, it feels like there's nothing to say. And so at some point there needs to be a breakthrough. Sometimes people they understand it, but they know they can't talk out of it, because when they try to talk out of it, it still tends to go back and they start reading books about it. So if I knew I am so self-conscious and so terrified of what people think of me that I could not do this if I weren't tongue-tied. Do you understand? Why not? I'm it's talking in riddles a little bit, but it's like that. It's like, be genuine. You can't make a fool. You can't make a fool out of somebody who's already a fool. Already knows they're totally foolish.
What
Yes.
does it mean to be foolish?
It's the caving in of your ideas about who you were, who you could be, who you'd like to be, who you'd like people to think you are. That all collapses into no self, no other. And so the feeling of that feeling that the ego has when that starts to happen is of being a fool, of being hoodwinked by one's own mind and by society and culture and parents and everyone, but basically by one's self. I don't know where all that comes from, but it's a big load of turnips. You've heard of the turnip truck? No, you haven't. You weren't born in the 40s like that. Go ahead.
When that starts to crumble, is there a way to give into that rather than resist?
So it's not necessary to give in, but it's necessary to watch the resistance. If you're just observing, resistance of anything like that gets its fuel from being agreed with or explained or justified or elaborated on, or from being rejected or attempt to destroy it or smush it down or get rid of it, or because it's karma coming from beginningless time until now, it's already spinning. So if you look away from it, then it gets to keep spinning. So you can't distract yourself. You have to actually be aware of it. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing initially, until you see that there really isn't anything there and there's no one here. There's just this. Like it says on the little calligraphy back here, as it is. It's just a way of kind of making a statement about it. It's just this. More? Don't give up. Keep going. Sean.
How do you just watch the resistance when there's, if you have like an automatic reaction to shut it down or to like clamp it down, like before, just like as soon as you're observing it, like you have the reaction to like shut it down or stop it, as you were saying, and that happens before like your awareness kicks in.
What's your question?
What do you do in that situation?
Just keep watching it. Excuse me. Just observe it. Spend time. If the body is in motion at all, even a little bit, it makes it more difficult for the awareness, the insight to see clearly. So it seems to be necessary, even for short periods. If your knees hurt and you can't sit for very long, then move your knees, flex them, stand up, and everything, and then return to being as still as you can with your back straight. All of the senses open, in particular the eyes. The reason we have our eyes open is because when you close your eyes, it gets closer to what we do when we sleep. So, but we don't have much in front of us. We have a wall, so that way the visual consciousness is operating, and it sees the space, but there's not much entertainment going on there. So you're weaning yourself away from the need for some kind of, are you listening? What did I say?
We're trying to wean ourselves away from the need.
That's pretty good. Yeah. So do that. You heard me. Do that. Sit down. Spend a lot of time on the cushion. If you want to do this, it takes a lot of work. And when I say work, it takes a lot of sitting here and it's been said, it's been called voluntary suffering. We're already suffering, we know that, but usually we try to get away from it. A monastery is a place where you can come and you can deliberately look at the difficulty itself. And it's different for each person. So every person has a different kind of karma, wiring and everything. That's why one shoe doesn't fit all. That's why if somebody wants to do creation completion practices, I'll teach them. But it looks like, having done that, it looks like you could probably do this with sitting practice. But you may need to do you may need to do Nundro practice or millions of mantras. I don't know. If you want to do that, I'll help you. If you don't trust me, then I'll find a lama for you to go to. So I'm not concerned with getting any kind of, getting you to stay doing this. You may need to do something else. If you do, then do that. But the way it looks right now, I would say, give it a couple of years. You're a young guy. Come in here for, look at that wall for a couple of years. And don't add. And how do you do that? You see the way you keep elaborating on everything, but you don't add to the elaboration. So there's no double negativity. The first negativity is difficult enough. Follow me? What did they say?
The first negativity is enough.
Very good.
It just causes.
You know why I'm asking you? Because I can't quite see your eyes, and it looks like you're looking sideways. That's why I'm asking. Are you looking sideways?
You want me to sit
Yeah.
like
Thank you. I could use all the help I can get. Yeah, sit like that from now on. Just kidding. No, just kidding. Further Shoto,
It takes a lot of work.
yes.
I've heard the word effort used too. What's work or effort that's not adding or pushing?
This is why we have forms, so that you can come in and do the form, and you know how difficult it is. You've done this form, the forms in here enough. You know how difficult they are. Difficult for in different ways, and just use the form, so that way you don't have to get in with some kind of exertion going on. It's already set up. It's already a big field you've got to plow. Here's the field, plow it. Here's the monastery. Here's the schedule. 6.5 hours of sitting meditation every day. Do it. That way you don't have to exert any effort. You just have to do as I say. Or as I recommend, as I suggest. You can always leave here. I would never have people leave and I don't stop them. People need to do whatever they need to do. How's Rumi doing? Okay? He's taking in the Dharma? Further questions?
Earlier you said stabilize on the cushion. I've never heard you say stabilize before.
I just thought it up. So what I'm saying by stabilize, it's not going to feel like stability, but if you take a big picture view of it, you'll see that you're spending a lot of time coming in, sit down, hold still, and observe. And the stability part comes from just the repetition of continuing to bring yourself back to stillness, back to silence, back to keep it as simple as possible, so we can see all the twists and twists and turns that keep going on in what we call the mind. We don't even know what it is. We don't even know if it's our mind. Doesn't matter. Doesn't belong to anybody actually, but that's shows up later on. More?
How can we function as a fool in a meritocracy?
We have a fool for a leader. Well, I said I was a fool, didn't I? Do as I say. And I say less is better, and I say don't do anything unless you have to. And this way you just have your own personal causes and conditions, your own personal karma to deal with this stuff you have to relate to because it's arising. But if you limit your activity, if you start to go out and if you haven't made friends with this and you've got stuffed passion, aggression, and ignorance down under the third rib, then when you go out into the environment, because it's so toxic and so difficult out there, that aggression will trigger this unexamined aggression, and the next thing you know, instead of being helpful out there with your sign that says no more war, instead of doing that, somebody attacks you, that might be stirred up. So less is better. And when I say be a fool, of course, it's just a feeling of being kind of helpless, not knowing exactly what to do. It's such a big, huge leviathan, our whole world and all the billions of people. It's so big that I say, train your mind first. If you train your mind, then anything you do will be, it will have you could say a dance-like quality to it. You'll never make another decision. If you're making decisions, then you're doing it based on relative situation, which can be accurate. But if you realize that there is no self, no other, that there isn't anything else. There isn't anything else but this. It's you're not only the whole idea of success and failure. The 8 worldly dharmas just collapse into each other. Of course, they're not separate from each other anyway. Even life and death go away. Life and death are not 2 separate things. They're 2 names for the same thing. So just continue to do that. Further on that question?
Do we have to resign from?
I didn't say anything about resigning. I haven't resigned. So you hear me say, don't take your eyes off from it. So in other words, watch the news. You don't have to load up on Fox News, to see what's going on. But, you can do a little bit. Buddhism is like the teaching's the middle way. It's not too tight, not too loose. Do a little bit of that, so you're in touch with the rest of the world, society, and so on, as far as you can be. Who knows where all that stuff's coming from? So a little bit of that, and then don't particularly go one way or another unless you have to. I mean, I yell at the television. Don't you?
I don't have TV.
Huh?
I don't have TV.
He got me there. Yeah. Should I get rid of mine?
Sounds like you're saying I should get one.
You can use mine. So again, coming back to that, it's looking for anything correct or incorrect is not so good. What might be good is to be willing to just not know what the hell to do, but continue to practice, continue to look, continue to interact with others. Continue to not jump to conclusions if you can help it. And if you do jump to conclusions, don't jump to conclusions about the conclusions, because that's a further lamination of, that's how the society got so strange, is because there's so many laminations of ignorance, policies, ideas, politics, and so on. So,
You brought up to Andrew's questions, two names for the same thing, and the common one I've heard you say is day and night, or two names for the same thing. What's the thing that they're both naming?
So we could come up with some kind of fancy idea around that, but it's the idea that they're not separate, not so much going to the continuing on some kind of ontological track where we have to find out what it is. It's just two names for the same thing. So you already have you already have day, and you already have night, two names for the same thing. Do you still have the question? Why not? I didn't answer it. Paraphrase what you said. Can you paraphrase it? Go ahead. Good job. I like that. Go ahead. Yeah? No? You had something?
Earlier you said, don't miss your life.
Yeah.
Are we missing our life when we find ourselves in a daydream?
No. No, because you're aware of the daydream. You might be missing it if you keep trying to push or manipulate yourself into some kind of ideal person who doesn't have daydreams, as if that's some kind of a magical success story.
So is a daydream this moment?
Could be. Whatever occurs is not separate. So we can say that all the time and even buy into it on some level, but to realize that is, it's like nothing has happened. That's why it's in the Nirvana Sutra, and I think I'm probably paraphrasing that kind of loosely, but realization is there's no accomplishment to it. If nothing is realized, then this is nirvana, or this is enlightenment. But if something is realized, then this is confusion or delusion, because you've realized something. But if you don't realize something, not going the opposite direction, having some kind of nihilism, it doesn't go that far. It's just like there isn't anything else. So you're just as ordinary as you were when you started the whole path. Further questions? Michelle?
So, in a sense, are you saying that the ordinary is actually quite extraordinary?
It's not separate from it. So it's an astonishing situation. At the same time, it's flat out nothing special. There are even books with those kind of, where teachers are trying to convey that. I think Charlotte Jo Beck has a book titled, isn't it, Every Day, Nothing Special or something like that? I don't know. But yeah, it is, but it's not something that is separate from its ordinariness. It's the other word, sometimes something in, I don't know what school this comes out of, but Mahamudra perhaps is co-emergent wisdom. Co-emergent is confusion and wisdom arise together, they're not separate. And then there isn't anything to know. There's nothing else to know. It's just this. But you no longer miss anything. You no longer get anything.
Is that the same as no longer needing or wanting anything?
You could say that, yeah. Like the way Kobun Roshi translates the Heart Sutra, Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasamgate, Bodhisvaha, is falling apart, falling apart, falling apart, nothing to do.
Oh, that's what that one, okay.
Falling apart, falling apart. It's, in other words, you could say, I don't know, maybe he didn't mean this at all, but you could say that the whole idea of the world, of who he was and what everything else was, everything just started to fall apart, and here he finds himself with completely negative concepts. No more conceptual clothing anywhere, so there's nothing to do. Of course, then if somebody asks you for help, you probably would help them because you're not separate from anyone. So I got more help from him probably than I've gotten from anybody. And the kind of help I got is he ignored me. I'm very grateful to him for that. Are we at the end of our sojourn? Very good. Thank you so much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of our red chant books. I'd like to call everybody's attention to the donation boxes in the hallway. We gladly receive and appreciate your financial help. We also accept PayPal and debit and credit cards.
Penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro san shi shi hu shi son bu sa mo ko sa. The three worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the tender actions and the three times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.